So hi guys, this is Vinit Srivastava. I'm with Actix, been with them for 8 years now. So how many people here are from the network side of things? Okay, does that work? Okay. So I believe with your questions, I guess you're from the network side. How about the others? Is it more network pretty much? No? Okay. So basically, we have been in the RAN space for a long time. So let me just quickly start with what we're going to be talking about today. So essentially, with the RAN, what we're seeing are multiple things. One is the changing face of mobile operators. So by that, what that means is essentially, before, like even 5 years ago, we had like 2, 3 maybe big operators, multiple smaller operators, much more regional operators. And now, all of a sudden, it's changing. It's 2 really big ones, 2 decently big ones, and then really, really small ones. So that middle space is now gone. It's all changing. And again, we don't know how that's going to be in the future. It might change even more, and things might happen. So that is really changing the game for what's available, who's going to be looking at the networks, and how everything is going to build in together. With all of these changes happening, RAN is really important. Now again, for example, T-Mobile and Metro PCS. One is CDMA, one is UMTS. There's no connection whatsoever. So you're now trying to integrate all the customers from your CDMA side into your UMTS LTE side. So all of that just adds complexity which wasn't there before. So just integrating them, trying to combine them, making sure that the new users don't start saying, hey, I was so much better with Metro. What happened now that I'm T-Mobile? What happened? So you want to make sure that doesn't happen. You want to make sure they still get the same experience that they had before. Again, and doing those things require, again, different data sets. So it might be drive test, network stats, customer data. There's so many places you can grab that information from. And essentially what you want to do is create KPIs, like basically figure out what are the things that matter to the users. And once you have that, pretty much that's it. The main thing is once you figure what the users are looking for, then it's easy to go and say, okay, let me analyze, let me see historically what's happening, what's changing, and I'll build accordingly. And again, we'll talk more about what we are doing, and I think that's where some of these things will come into play, is how we use the customer data to figure out where you're going to invest in your network going in forward. And again, the final thing, and again, I will talk briefly about that, is what we are doing is, again, using that customer data, geolocating them, and then using that to drive SON, which is the next thing that you want to get to. So a small presentation, but again, I'll go through it quickly about Actix. So we have been in business since 1991. We started as a drive test optimization company, moved to network stats, customer data, geolocation, now into SON. Again, our flagship product now is Actix One. So as I said, before it was all desktop-based products. Now it's all cloud-based. And when I say cloud-based, it's still within the operator premises. So it is on the web. They can access it from their IE, from their browsers, but they still need to be either VPN or on the network. Again, for the sensitivity of the data, it's still something we see. It's a cloud, but it's more like a private cloud rather than a public cloud. Again, with Actix One, we have more than all those dots that you see. Those are all of the operators that have Actix One using it for the analytics. Again, more than, it says 55, it's more than 60 now. Okay, we have 60 there. And again, we have pretty much everyone. So in the US, T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, Vodafone. You can see Asia, pretty dense. So we have a big coverage footprint of who's using Actix One. And again, as we said, we started with drive tests. So we have inputs into all sorts of data. So we get drive test data, we're getting network stats data, we're getting the customer geolocation data. Not geolocation, we're getting customer data that we are geolocating. And using that, we're really driving that analytics piece of how everything should come out. And so far, again, what we have been doing so far was, again, getting all the data, aggregating it, presenting it in a way that engineers could make sense of and say, okay, I see my drive having drops, I see my network KPI has gone bad, I see my geolocated data shows me the same thing, let me figure out what to do. So the next logical step was, now that we have all the data, build a SON solution around with all of that data source. So you can actually then take that intelligence and build it into the whole platform. So that's what we are very much focused in and doing right now actively. And one key bit about Actix itself is 2 weeks ago, we did get acquired by Amdocs. So we do see that as it's going to be a great thing for us and for them, because again, they are big on CRM and billing. We are really good on the network side. So combining them together is the next phase that you really want to integrate all of that really closely. So that's quickly about what Actix is, where we are. So quickly, again, some of these are just data points. You always see these things. So I'm not going to go about everything, but just a brief summary. Back again, as I said, 4 years ago, much different networks. It was, the data was still not there. It was still voice. You didn't really have to do anything. Like everybody just knew how to fix CDMA, how to fix UMTS. There was nothing required to make it work. Everything was just churning around like a well-oiled engine. You're just getting everything working. So that was back then. Now it's all different. So now you have small cells, a big DAS, indoor DAS, outdoor DAS, head nets. So everything is now changing. It's just not your macro sites anymore. That's really changed. Voice, that has changed. Now everything is on LTE going towards data. So all of the money is now coming from that side of the business. In terms of just the amount of data, the amount of people using it, we always see the net subscriber ads every time. So we're seeing people just coming on to the networks. More and more people are using smartphones and getting into using the data rather than just the voice piece of the whole network. And then again, with more people coming in, you just need more sites. And again, as more people come in, the cost of actually using that data is going down. So for example, T-Mobile now just came out with that Un-carrier model, which just changed the whole pricing model. So everybody was used to AT&T's and Verizon's model where you pay $100 for 100 gig, et cetera, now has an option where there's no contract. They figure out what they want to do. So that basically what that means is it's going to basically cost everyone money. It's going to cost revenue because once people start liking that, everybody else will have to kind of match and do the same thing on their side to be in business, not be in business, but at least offer something competitive that people can come to. So I think, again, that's what's changing. The network's changing, the business side is changing, how they're going to make money, that's changing. So that's a big deal. Also, what are you going to be looking at is changing again. We talked about, again, how it's all data. So for example, the first thing we all do when again, I think all of us travel, we go to different places, get out our phones, check our email periodically, every 10 minutes. Maybe check Facebook, maybe check Twitter. So we don't really, before, all it was we had a phone in our pockets, and we would wait for someone to call us if there's something needed, or if we need from somebody something, we'll call them. But now that's not the case anymore. Now it's more the phone is the centerpiece of our lives, or the tablet, or whatever else we're using. We are just browsing for no reason, if I may say that. I have nothing better to do. Hey, I'll get out my phone. If I'm having lunch by myself, get the phone, read some news, read something else. So I'm always constantly with my phone doing something, and that something is always data. So now that's where the piece is. So all the money now is going to be in data and not voice. So that's one of the things that's coming in is now that you have data, analytics change. How the type of service that you're offering, that's going to change. What type of things that you offer, that's going to change. Again, same thing we talked about, like how T-Mobile has changed the game with the billing, et cetera, like how they're offering things. So all those things change exactly what type of analysis we'd be doing as part of making the network still run and still make money for everyone. So in terms of RAN, so what we have seen, and again, these are numbers compiled from all of our worldwide teams, is essentially about 50 billion still today goes in CapEx towards RAN. So you're still spending a lot of money just on the network, just trying to make sure you're keeping up with the number of people that you have, offering more services, getting better throughputs, et cetera. So that money is still being spent, and the way we see it, it will still keep being spent because you'll have LTE Advanced, VoLTE, everything else coming about. So things will change. You still have to invest in your RAN. Also, the other thing that we see is RAN does still cause issues because RAN is the one piece that always changes. If it's summer versus winter, RAN changed. Let's say there was a parking lot, now a building came up, the RAN has changed. So that's the one thing that always keeps changing. The core side, you can look at your stats, you can see, okay, I'm having throttling, I don't have enough T1s, et cetera, or whatever we have, add more, you can do that. With RAN, it's always going to keep changing, keep modifying what's happening. Also, the other things, and we'll talk about that, is when we look at our geolocated data, what we see is there's always a small percentage of areas that really carry most traffic. So maybe in Europe, for example, that could be train stations where people congregate and they're waiting for a long time. In this case, it could be business complexes or maybe malls. So they're very specific locations where you really have the maximum usage. And what you want to do is figure out where those locations are, because that's what drives your analytics now rather than just network KPIs. And also, what we have seen is there are only a certain number of locations that constantly cause issues. Now, what that means is basically what we've been, so far, the general consensus and the way we have been dealing with the RAN is look at network KPIs. So look at my top 10 list, top 20 list, see, okay, that doesn't meet the drop call rate or the throughputs, et cetera, and I try to fix it. And the only way I can fix it is make some changes, either change a till, change parameters, not really knowing where that change is going to have an impact. Because with network stats, all you know is a sector level information. The sector might cover 5 kilometers. So maybe the problem area is a small section right in the center that's, or maybe at the edge that's causing the problem. But I'm trying to fix something for the entire 5 kilometers, which actually might still be working. So I think that's where it gets important, is to figure out locations of where those issues exist. And that's where, again, the Actix analytics come into play. So this gives you a really great snapshot. This is from one of our deployments. And essentially what we're doing is using customer data. So we are getting, again, we have GPH data, we have LT call trace, et cetera. So it's basically your call trace data that is being collected 24/7. All subscribers, again, that is something you can set up. But you can basically collect 100% of your subscribers 24/7 and figure out where they are and what they're doing. So things that you can see again. And what that data contains is that data by itself does not have any geolocation. All it has is maybe a few towers of which it was talking to when it initiated the call, that did something else. A GPS, yes. Once you have a GPS that's different, then that really makes a big difference. So now if you have a GPS, that really helps a lot in what we're doing. So once you have that, it's basically now what you're doing is, rather than looking at the network stats, just looking at a certain sector, now I'm actually going and seeing, okay, what areas do I really have an issue in? So everything here, great coverage, I don't need to bother with that. Places where there is an issue, I can actually see it and focus my attention towards fixing where those locations exist and figure out, okay, what do I change to actually make the network better in that area? So now I actually have insights into knowing exactly what will happen if I make any changes. So with this, the other things you know is, again, you just don't know, you know the coverage, you know the quality. You can figure out where the drops are. Again, let's say the network stats said the drop rate increased 5%. That doesn't happen, but let's say that happened. With the real subscriber data, you can actually see where that increase came from. Did something happen here? Did something happen up there? Something else, or was just spread around everywhere? That's what helps you understand when you geolocate and look at the data, you actually know where that real problem exists. The other things you can do with all of this data is, again, and I think some of the things that Comscore might be talking about, is when you're doing handset analysis. So you can see with all this data, you actually, if you combine them with the data from the CRM, et cetera, what type of handset are the users using? Is it an iPhone? Is it Android? Is it something else? What kind of traffic is being carried by each? So is the maximum traffic in that area from an iPhone? Is it Samsung? Is it something else? Same thing for problems. Is which device is actually causing me the problem? Is it, again, you can basically differentiate everything not just by location, but also by device type. So maybe there's a device issue, which you need to take back to the handset manufacturer and say, hey, look, same area, iPhone does X, Samsung does Y, you need to fix what you're doing. So it adds a lot of intelligence once you have this geolocated data that gives you not just information about the customer, but also just about the network that wasn't possible before when you have this. So once you have this information, again, it really makes it a lot simpler to figure out what I need to fix to really address those issues that I'm seeing in the network. And again, we talked about creating KPIs, right? So again, once you have all this network, these are different just examples of what KPIs you can create when you're looking at the data. So again, roamers, not such a big deal in US, but it's a big deal in Europe and Asia. So what is a lot of the revenue for them comes from roamers. So how many roamers are being served in a certain location now?
Maybe not next year after this,
right? So we'll find, again, so far, still, they still focus, like, again, as I said, in the US, we don't really care about the roamers. There's no, probably negligent business from them. But you just want to figure out who are the customers, for example, generating demand at a certain site. Again, one important thing that you can do with the geolocation data is VIP. So everybody has corporate accounts that you want to keep, want to maintain, want to make sure that they are getting a level of service that keeps them as customers forever. So with this data, you can figure out if those key accounts are having any issues. Are those guys facing issues? And again, if they are, it can be addressed because again, we can flag them saying, hey, the drop call rate went up in this area, and again, this is your corporate customer that you won't care about, so fix this first. So you can create those rules, you can create all of that information from the data and look at those KPIs and have the solution peg them for you automatically. Show it, okay, here's what's changing. So people can go and proactively look at it, fix it before it becomes a big deal in terms of what they're doing. The other thing you can do is, again, because you have all the data, it's good for just the account teams to take it back saying, look, here are the problems we had in the last year. This is how quickly we saw it. This is how quickly we fixed it. So it just makes a lot of sense to really keep your customers, especially, again, the big accounts that you want, keep them happy. That's what you all want to do. And again, different things as we talked about. You can figure out what's the load generated by the iPhone because, again, a new phone comes by. Again, we have seen cases where there just be too much signaling overload coming from them. So sometimes you have to work with them, so it just helps you understand those things. In this case, again, what we're just showing very quickly is kind of the behavior that drives the demand. So again, this is actually from real customer data in Europe that we had. So what is the amount of traffic coming in, for example, into where there was a transport hub, the central business district in a university. So you can see how many subscribers are coming in using your network and what type of things they're doing, how much data is being carried by each one of them, how much is the voice, what's the upload, downloads, etc. So you can figure those things out and come up and, again, just see what's happening with each location. And again, focus your attention saying, okay, for example, in this case, if we see the busy hour for voice calls is between 4 and 5, in this case between 2 to 3. So now you know that you can assign resources based on, hey, you know what, the busy hour for that specific location is 2 to 3, and maybe it's right next to the city hub where the busy hour doesn't happen till 4 to 5. So now you can plan and say, you know what, let's move resources. Let's make sure we serve this center better between 2 to 3 and make sure we serve the other one better between 4 to 5. So it gives you a lot of insights into how you can really optimize, and I would say personalize the network for where you're seeing issues. Again, this is more about how we can use it to drive different ROIs for what you're doing. So for example, with HeadNet, what are you doing? Are you doing a Wi-Fi offload? Are you doing a small cell? Are you doing a DAS? And based on that, again, put a dollar figure around each to see what it would take to really do that and get the experience that you're looking for. So you can, again, build a matrix that just defines what is your return on investment. When you do that, what is it that you get back from the clients and how quickly that would work. Finally, we talked about SON. So as we said, again, we have this data. Again, we showed a quick snapshot of once you have this location-based data. So I know where they might be having issues with uploads, for example. There's not enough speed. There's drop calls. So we have that information. Again, being the RAN analytics side, we have information about the network itself. We know what their tilts are, what the parameters are. So the next logical step, obviously, is to then focus and say, okay, now that we have this, let's just fix it ourselves. So as part of doing that, and again, we are doing this with a current big operator in Europe. We have good results from them, just not public yet. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to share that very soon. But essentially, what we are doing now is rather than using network stats to drive SON, we are using customer stats to drive SON. So if I'm having an issue in a certain location, let me fix maybe a couple of sectors around it that will get me the best bang for the buck. So if I fix this, I get rid of the problem. So with the geolocated data, that's the key, is now rather than it being a black box where everything was driven by the network stats, and as I said, the key with network stats is, again, it gives you a good holistic picture of what happened, but doesn't really help you solve what you're trying to do. With the geolocated customer data, you know exactly where the problem is. You can fix exactly what needs to get done to make that work. So with the SON, again, there are a couple of things we are doing. Again, the one thing I think about SON is, let's say tomorrow, if I come and give you the Google self-driven car, some of us will take it, some of us will still like to drive it. We're not going to just let it drive for ourselves till you believe in it and do it. So What we are doing is, again, have an assisted SON model where we will make the suggestions, tell you what to do, and the engineer still has the power to say, okay, you know what, I like this, I don't like this, so that's why I'm going to do this. So we still want to let them feel comfortable with what we are doing and just use that as the last step. Or again, it can be an end-to-end model where there's it's a closed loop SON, no interaction needed, it just figures out the problems, sees what the solution is, fixes it, whether it's a tilt, whether it's a parameter change, something else, neighbors, whatever it could be, to fix that and implement it and then track to see what changes happen. And with the Actix solution, what we also drew is, again, the SON being a black box, once it's automatic closed loop, what you want to do is be able to track what happened with the changes. So with the solution, you can see when a change was made and what impact it had on the network and the KPIs themselves. So it's not a black box anymore where we did something and hope that it worked. There will be ways for engineers to go back and still say, okay, this change didn't make sense, maybe this did not make sense. And that's one of the ways to continuously make the algorithm even going better going forward, is there's a way to feed back and see what's happening in there. I think this was the last slide. Again, some numbers that we have, again, looked at in terms of, again, what happens when you have all of this data together. So when you have that data, again, you can, and I think we've talked about that, once you reduce your drop call rates, your customer satisfaction is just going to go up tremendously. You can very quickly improve your, again, there was a question, right? Like if a customer calls in and says, hey, I'm having this issue. So you can look at historical data and say, oh yeah, I know there's a problem because we know there's a coverage solution. You can look in the solution and say, yeah, there is a new site being planned in a month, so you'll have that, or maybe 6 months. Nothing happens in a month. But yeah, there's a site coming up in 6 months to a year. Till then, maybe, and you can figure out if there's too many complaints, you can still figure out what to do. But just with the solution, having everything together in that one interface just gives it a much better experience for the user in terms of what they're doing and the experience they're having with the operator itself. Okay, questions? Yes? How? So we have proprietary algorithms that even I don't know, but it's the R&D. They have done a few things to figure that out between who's indoor versus who's outdoor. But we are doing that pretty, like we've checked that, and it's pretty good. Yeah. Yes, he's Sung. So Sung, he's my technical counterpart, works with me. Hey, Sung, you want to come up and it'll be easier?
And as Vinit mentioned, we do know when a call originates on the outside and you're walking in. And then when you hand over to a sector that we get classified as indoor, you know you're indoor, and we can classify that your job actually took place inside. So one of the things that Vinit showed with the different colors on the map, instead of looking at it just a sector level, we actually have more of a 100 meter by 100 meter geolocated area. So we know that if you're from outside, you happen to walk indoor when the drop gets paid, and that was the whole idea of that nice little picture you saw. You can actually see now on the grid where the calls are actually being placed inside or outside. So we do get that information as part of the inputs from the network, and we use that to help geolocate your information.
Yeah, sure, sorry. More like, let's say the C-level teams and a lot of the operators, they're not really active, or CTO, let's say, anyways, they're not really going towards the SON in a big way on the self-optimization part, maybe the planning, the neighbor relationships, those kind of things, some of the features you use, but there was this big hype about going towards small cells. What I'm seeing is that they're not really taking off. They're using carrier eyes, they're using other strategies to go about this. So can SON help them, for instance, see value in some of these ways towards helping to choose the right solution?
It would be, and I think that's right. So the question was, like a lot of the CTO teams still don't believe in SON, and I would agree with that. We see that as, and I said, that's where the Google analogy came in. It will take a while before people believe in it and actually move forward with it. But the question was, once you have all this data, the other thing was, we see a lot of small cell talk that, again, it's going to be the next big thing, but you're not seeing that enough yet. So again, how does SON help in doing that? So I would say, again, Small cells, again, you really, with SON, you're really fixing what's already existing. With small cells, you're deploying something. So with Actix 1, where this can help is, again, once you have information about where you have issues and locations, let's say you figure out it's inside a mall that I'm having the most drops or throughput issues. And maybe I can't have a macro site in there. So just using that geolocated data, that does help me understand what the possible solution is going to be. Is if I already have macros, I mean, maybe there's a DAS that really is going to solve the problem. So just seeing the location of where that problem exists, it will definitely help you say what the solution should be and justification for what that solution is. Because, hey, look, there's no way a macro is ever going to get approved in this area. So you'll
But
need
that'll never go to the CTO level. That'll just stay.
it will stay at the direct, right. So it will stay at that level. But again, the way we see it is when you, like somebody, when you're asking for a small cell, again, you have to make justification saying, hey, I'm spending this amount of money on the small cell for X and Y, Z reasons. So that food chain maybe stops at the ED level, maybe the SVP at the most, I would say. But I think at that level, that's where you would see the solution going in. But I think, again, I think that's where.
It's basically the network. I think where I'm going with this is the big data, the data analytics as per the RAN side of things. I don't see it going towards the C level. I see it staying in the manager, the RF director, RF manager level. It'll never, unless it's done in a very, very big way.
And
it's very hard to justify to the C level.
Right. And I guess from our perspective, that's where Amdocs comes in. Is they're the guys who work at the C level, who do everything at the C level. And they have their vision of what they want to do with this, how they combine them together to take it to that C level and make it work. So I think that's where it's going to make sense. Yes? Right. So again, for us, so far it has always been the assisted workload for the engineers, where we bring everything together that they can look at and figure out what they should be doing. The SON that we're doing now, so we are interacting with the policy teams, but again, we don't have enough information about how everything is being done on the back end. But definitely that's something that we are integrating with and working with them right now. So looking at what the QoS should be, for example. Because again, you have to figure that out if you're doing SON. If I'm doing a VoLTE caller, I just have a much higher QoS, so I have to make sure those guys get fixed first. So we are working on that. Again, I don't have all the details. Again, I think within the next month or two, we just have a lot more information about what we're doing with the customer right now.
This is more directed towards Actix as a company, and
Yep.
its competitive position. So we're working with Actix as well. So team of biometric
Nope.
pieces, I'll speak to you later about that. But with service-aware RAN coming up strongly, I think the vendors, large vendors like the Ericssons, the Unisons and stuff, they're integrating it already into their edge nodes,
Like the you're talking about SON?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, service-aware RAN, so
Right.
leading to where so SON is another component. of that,
Right.
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 So how are you, if you're in the business of collecting this data, how are you guys positioned against the vendors in this area?
So I think a few things. The first thing would be being vendor agnostic. So I think that's one of the key things is, let's say you have a different, again, you have Ericsson, you have NSN, etc. Everybody has their own software, their own interface, their own way of doing things. Once you have something like Actix, which becomes vendor agnostic, it's the same user interface. So it does not matter what's the underlying infrastructure. All you're doing is the same kind of analysis with the solution. So,
But twice the traffic, twice the processing, twice the equipment, twice the costs.
right. So I think again, that's how we build the system. Is we never create like a mother of all databases. So what we're always doing is, let's say Ericsson has its own database. We'll go and plug data that's needed from them. So we're not going to just do everything. Because again, Ericsson OSS is going to collect 10,000 parameters. We're not going to bring in all 10,000, but say, out of those 10,000, these are the 1,000 ones that are the most often used and which would make sense, get those. So we never create like a complete copy of everything. Either we directly go into the OSS so we get that, or again, if they have already put it somewhere, use that as the data source to get into the solution. So that's where the key, I think the key thing is, again, and as a product company, and I would say, it again depends on, I think we have a lot more investment because we are a product company only. Like with NSA and Ericsson, they have a lot of other businesses that they're focusing on. And this is one part of it. With us, building our products to be top-notch is the only thing we're doing. That's how we make our money. So we always be focused on really doing something that makes sense and it's easier and what the customer thinks is the right thing to do. Yeah.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening.